Hello everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to continue. In this part, we're going to continue lecture 7 and lecture 8. And today we're going to be talking about value chain sustainability. So, sustainability means maintenance for a long amount of time, which means you try to allow your business to stay in a long amount of time, help the society to be able to have a long-term life as a whole. So it emphasizes firms' effort to make decisions in a way to be sustainable, not just from the firm's own perspective. So now it's not only for the profit of the firm, we're talking about the broader context, about the society, about people's livelihood, but from the perspective of the entire value chain participants, including all the stakeholders. So I want to explain what are the stakeholders. So don't confuse stakeholder with shareholder. Shareholders are those who are holding a certain amount of shares, which they are spending kind of an investment. They are putting investment for you to, as a business manager, to expand your businesses, and you're giving certain return. Stakeholder is someone who just have certain relations, interest to the business. So we have internal stakeholder and external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders are those like managers, employees who have actually direct connection and interest to you within the business. And external stakeholders can be quite broad. It can be the government, can be communities, can be certain NGO, non-profit organization, can be environmental clubs, environmental societies. These are the people who also have an interest on your business, which means you are kind of affecting them, while they are not part of your internal business structure. So they are not either shareholders, they are not managers, not employees, not someone who is working for you inside the company, but who has certain effects from your business practices. So in the sustainability, we're looking at it in a holistic view, which is like a 360-degree view, quite a large view, and the views are broken down into environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. And sustainable action behavior means value is created in such a way that output is more valuable than input. So we try to kind of put some certain amount of input, but we have more output compared to the input. So the concept is not going to be monetary, so it's quite different from all the other lectures we talked about, because in our first 7 lectures, or kind of 7.5 lecture, because the last part was also about strategy, we always talked about making profit, because we are kind of trying to create value by selling our products, so on, producing, so on, so on, for the nation. But here we're looking at society, so we are not, the concept of value is not monetary only. It will cover a kind of very pretty broad concept. So our framework are our value system sustainability, sustainability area, sustainability stakeholders, and levels. So now let's look at the characteristics. What are the characteristics of different stakeholders? So first of all, we have an indirect upstream. So indirect upstream are those who are our second or lower tier supplier. So for example, if you are a cheap company, they are maybe the first few people who are kind of those who are supplying potatoes, maybe the first level, who are those lower tier supplier. Then after it's kind of fried, potato maybe the second supplier. Sorry for the bad example. So after it's fried and it's delivered to you, this is most closer. This is your closest supplier, which will be your direct upstream supplier. So I think you get what the point is. You get the broad point. And so indirect upstream supplier are those who are lower tier supplier, which is second or lower. So they're also part of our stakeholder. And then we have this upstream participants. Upstream participants are those who are our first tier supplier. And they are kind of our vendors, direct vendors who are supplying products to us, maybe supply to the warehouses, supply to our manufacturers. So that is our direct upstream stakeholders. Our internal stakeholders, sorry, I missed this part, but I don't think you have to understand. I think you already understand, so because they are the firm's top management faculties, those are executives and shareholders as well. Those big shareholders, not those small who buy the one share, they're not counted. Or maybe counted as part of a small stakeholder, and as well as those firms' employees, including managers and workers. Moving on. Now we have a direct downstream, and those actually our first tier distributors, indirect downstream our second tier distributors and customers. So although it's quite wordy, but you can just simplify your word. Second or lower tier supplier, direct supplier, first tier supplier, first tier distributor, second or remote tier distributor, or second or lower tier distributor, and then the customer. So this is pretty straightforward. Don't want to stay too long. And sustainability stakeholders. So in the national boundary, we have a general public who are actually everybody in the country a stakeholder, because kind of they are affected. Although it can be a small group, like if you're producing pollution, company's producing pollution, they actually affect general public, not only the community, but it can be a kind of a small amount, because if you're producing your producing your products, manufacturing in only 2 cities, maybe the most of your case will be like one province got pollution, but it's not going to affect the whole country. But general public basically means the civilians may be affected, so they are kind of a national boundary stakeholder. You should categorize them under national boundary stakeholder. Then we have the NGO, non-profit organization. and others. So they are also part of that. Social groups, interest group, like environmental interest groups. Some of them are putting pressure. One example I'll show you is Body Shop. I think you guys know Body Shop. So Body Shop is a pretty famous cosmetic company. So basically have some they basically sell this. I think you see in the supermarket. I'm actually living in Singapore. I saw this. I think in the States you also have it, or other countries still have it, South Korea. But they have something called animal testing. So people are criticizing Body Shop for like kind of using rabbits for the test, because they want to find out whether the cosmetics will be harmful to human or not, or whether it will be effective. So they use animals to do the test. And as a result, many companies are now adding pressure to these companies, so they are kind of pressuring them to not do this. And these are what we call as social groups, or maybe non-profit organization, animal caring groups, maybe this kind of a human rights, animal rights group. So they are actually adding pressure. They may do some protest. They may kind of sue the company to certain government, to certain agencies, certain organizations. So when the pressure, like in our lecture 0, I said that everybody's awareness can take a part in changing the conglomerate business practices. So when people can organize, maybe it starts from one person, but when they're able to kind of build up a whole chain, they're able to add a lot of pressure. They force the companies to change their business practice. For example, for Body Shop, they force them to stop using animal testing. I'm still not sure whether they are secretly continuing doing so, and I believe many cosmetic companies are actually applying this animal testing strategy, this method. Okay, so they are also stakeholders. Beware if you are a manufacturing company. If you're manufacturing something, they can create pollution, contamination, environmental damages, so you have to be careful on NGOs effects. Then it's about the competing value chains, who are, for example, Samsung Electronics value chain is competing with LG's in Korea. These are your national stakeholders, like in the countrywide. It applies both mostly to large businesses. And for them, you have to kind of, I don't know, you can use some certain strategy like corporations, or even you just continue the competition in the market. And also government, definitely. Government are those who can do regulations, but sometimes the interest groups are more kind of, government still care about the economy. So for example, in the environmental question, government may balance a bit. They might impose some fines for bad business practices, but as a whole, I believe the government is also care about economy as well. So government will basically not add too much pressure for you, but if you are producing too much pollution, I think, if you're paying lower wages, lower than average, then government will be the one who's taking part. Because once someone sue, or your employee sue the government, or the government is having agencies to check your business, and they found out there are some loopholes, there are problems that are against the law, unlawful practices, then you actually be fined, or receive some certain penalties by the government. And now in the global market scale, we also have a lot of shareholders, including I think the same thing as well. Basically the same thing. National bank, after you globalize, as we were talking about globalization in our first part of the lecture 8. So in terms of a global market, we also have this general public communities and these things as well. So taking an example for non-competing value chain, so Samsung Electronics value chain, Korea is not directly competing with General Motors in the US, at least currently. So we have non-competing value chain as well. So how do I say this? So basically it means something that it's not really directly linked to you, but they are kind of a stakeholder. They're not competing. So don't care too much about it for now, but make sure you have to impose some strategies, maybe for collaborations to improve the relationship for long-term benefits. Now, remember, we talk about lower tier, immediate. We talk about the tier stakeholders, and now look at this. So value system is stakeholder national boundary, and in the national boundary as well. So we have a lower tie, then we immediate supplier, focal company, immediate retail, and customer. So these are the processes, our flow of our stakeholders. I'm mentioning here, so I don't want to go too long. I'll be posting a slide in a certain link. After the course is finished, I'll be posting all the slides, so you can kind of look at this and think about yourself more slowly and more in greater detail. So put this up. Okay, sustainability stakeholders. In the global market, when we have national boundary, remember the global market can either affect us or we affect them. So when we implement our company, when we go globalize, we have to care about their stakeholders and think about how they can affect us. For example, some countries do not allow, they are quite aware of the environmental effect, and some developing economies may not be that affected compared to developed countries, because they are now caring about economy, and they believe economy is a better way to improve livelihood rather than kind of adding cost to many businesses and protecting the environment. So be careful of that. So that's an example. And now it's time for us to talk about our sustainability areas. So our areas are focusing on 3 Venn diagram circles. They are interconnected. They are economic, social, and natural. Why are they interconnected? Because when you are kind of trying to maintain environmental sustainability, you first have to have economic sustainability. which means you have to kind of preserve resources for future economic activities, and as a whole, you have economic activities to try to innovate them, maybe use renewable energy sources to reach a natural point of view. And economically, you should also improve your education, skill, quality of life, so on and so on. So now let's do a breakdown of the element. So for economic, it may not be too straightforward. It is actually easy. It's basically the economic cost and benefit analysis. Remember, I talked about output should be greater than input. That's our goal, ultimate goal, our kind of hope. So in this case, we try to improve our economic efficiency, produce with little cost, and produce with sustainable resources, and we use our profits to reserve resources for future economic activities. So after we have a profit, we try to let them we try to implement. We'll be able to kind of implement this our profit for future activities and self-financing. Social aspect. On social aspect, it is about social stability and development of the society. This is a good what politics is about. Politicians want to improve the social sustainability, but it's linked to economic as well. Because once you have a long-term activities, you can improve the employment rate, something like that. So the conditions, improving human conditions, are part of a social aspect. And for example, their education, job, skills, quality of life, and self-actualization, which means they get promoted or recognized by their superiors or managers. And then we have justice, fairness, moral, ethics, and trust. So we trust each other. We have a moral. Even if something like a scolding or something like a asking employees to work extra time is sometimes legal, but try to balance between your profits, your goals, and the moral goals as well. Not only your profitable goals, your business-oriented goals, but care about work ethics, work moral. Try to provide employees with a comfortable work environment. Maybe their work is hard, but trying to provide them to let them feel that the work is stable, the work is okay. Not because once you can maintain their kind of a happiness, don't need to be too happiness because too much happiness because work is can be tiring. But however, try to maintain their happiness so they'll have higher efficiency. It will not only benefit them, but benefit you, because once they have a happiness, once they are motivated, they are likely to increase their efficiency and commitment into working for you. And perseverance, improvement of culture. Your corporate culture should be preserved in a social aspect, so try to do team building activities, do more kind of sharing activities to let employees sink your culture into their brains, and let the employees feel they are part of a company, let them be proud of working for you. So you should develop your brand image not only for the customer, oh, Coca-Cola is so good, but also develop your employees. Like, I'm proud, I'm glad to work for Coca-Cola. It is a great organization with well moral and ethical practices, with well relationship, with well work and life balance, something like that. So you kind of improve and preserve the company culture right here. And then we have environmental aspects. Since this is the most straightforward one, you guys all know. Earth's carrying capacity. You try to have a perform environmental friendliness, to perform environmental friendly business practices, reduce carbon dioxide emissions, nitrogen emissions, carbon footprint, and reduce greenhouse effect. Because environmental effects can cause health issues, can cause global warming. Even it can cause not only health issues just from contamination, but if global warming developed to a certain extent, maybe our Earth will not be able to inhabit. There will be 100 years in the future. No one will be able to inhabit on Earth, and in this case, the problem is maybe a human will extinct. The whole species will extinct. Okay, and we'll continue our discussion on our next part. We'll talk about the strategic priority, because although we've given this sustainability, it is pretty hard to achieve them because our goal is still to make profit, and we don't have enough money to kind of achieve all these goals. And so in the next part 3, we're going to discuss about strategic priority. Which one should you do first in order to able to achieve the other stages? Which one is most important? So you'll be able to learn about this and operational priority as well, and then we'll discuss about this. And in part 4, we're going to talk about effective decision making for global sustainable supply chain. If you have any questions below, feel free to comment. I'll be happy to answer you. So I'll see you in the next video on our part 3 on lecture 8. See you later.